getting back to the 40 plus demographic, I mean, that is the prime demographic for male self-deletion. And so whenever I hear some chick tell me why she thinks that the deletion rate of men ages 45 or is so high, it depends on whose numbers or what demographic you're targeting. It's as high as 3.5, and I've seen it as high as 5, depending on what age bracket we're actually looking at. So the aggregate is really more like 4. Like 4 times as likely for men to successfully self-delete than women. Of course, what happens then is we got to go, well, women attempt it more. Men 4 times as likely to self-delete, women most affected. Right.
Correct.
And so we've got this pervasive narrative of let's find a way to lessen the impact. Let's find a way to sort of like place the blame back on toxic masculinity, back on emotionalism, which is really what this chick does. And the reason why I used that last clip is because that's primarily what most women will do, is they'll use it as a social construct. They'll say the reason why you have 3.5 to 4 times the deletion rate is because they were taught toxic masculinity. And I will tell you right now, it's horseshit. Wow. And has been horseshit for a long time. It's not about social constructionism. It's not about toxic masculinity. It's simple pragmatism. Yep. It's men rebuilding themselves. And that's really what Reignites about, right? It's like, we're here to help you rebuild yourself. And if you've ever seen or read any of the work I've done on getting zeroed out.
Yeah, that's the term I like that you use.
I use it because throughout a man's life, he's going to be zeroed out at some point. Sooner or later, and usually multiple times. Yeah. So, and how you sort of snap back from failure or from defeat is at least as important as how you sort of handle success, right? Yeah. So we have this culture. If there is a cultural narrative, it's about this emotionalism. It's about, we need to talk about it more. But it's about because we have to, cry it out, boy, kind of thing. And it's like, no, it's not like that. That's simply not how men fucking process emotions. And when we look at the statistics and we look at the studies and we look at we can look at fMRI studies. I mean, literal, it's quantitative studies here, set you up with whatever they do for I think they put probably diodes or something on your head. We can see that men do not process emotion the same way that women do. They do not have the hardware that women do when it comes to processing emotion, and especially negative emotions. Yeah. Men tend to default to anger. Women tend to default to crying, right? So just because the guy isn't crying doesn't mean he's emotionally stunted or he's been in some way damaged emotionally. He doesn't need therapy. What he needs? He needs to get in the squat rack. That's his therapy. Right. Not go see some therapist, not go and, see some psychiatrist or something. And not the self-help books that are supposed to help women, but never do. That guy's not going to benefit from that kind of stuff. Right. So that's why we're doing this. And so when I hear stuff like this, and I hear this diagnosis from these armchair psychologists saying what they think is the right thing to say, it's what I call sounds right logic, because we've heard this enough times that it sounds like this is the reality of it. And the fact of the matter is we have so much more education and so much more knowledge about why men self-delete and how men and women process emotion and what the priorities of those emotions being processed are, or how men essentially make a pragmatic, efficient decision to off themselves because they're faced with a question. I can either rebuild myself or I can delete myself. And tragically, too many guys delete themselves because they don't see any way forward and they don't see any way to make
I think with I love it how you say zeroed out, because that's exactly what it feels like. It's a loss of value of trying to reestablish in your own mind your own self-value. And it doesn't matter if it's the first time or if it's the third or fourth or fifth time that you've been zeroed out in your life, but it's harder as you're older because there's less time. It's harder to recover from. So even if you've done it, even if it's happened 2 or 3 times, you've had some practice, you should be okay at this. No, because each time that it happens again, it's even harder to recover from. And that's why I think you see the numbers extrapolate up as they get older into the older age groups.
Exactly. That's when you get into the 5 times as likely range. And then the other thing that they never want to talk about on any one of these shows, on Tom Bellew, on Chris Williamson, on any of these shows that are supposed to be these in-depth, real, thought-provoking, probing interviewers, they never want to talk about the fact that like men who are going through a divorce are 8 times as likely. They're already 4 times as likely. No. Now they're 8 times as more likely because they've been put through this.
Correct. They've lost so much of their own ego, and then they've had invested so much time into what they've accomplished, and they're losing half or losing all. Yeah,
it's a loss. It's sunk cost is what it is.
It is.
And I hate to like. I mean,
that's how we look at it as men.
Yeah, it's how sunk cost. Why bother? That's what it comes down to. Why bother going on?
Yeah.
And if you can just get past this point and stop thinking in terms of this sort of female dynamic and this female feminized emotionalism, you can actually help guys.
Right.
That's why we're doing Reignite. The reason I'm like so emphatic about this right now is because we work with 3 guys just this weekend out in Los Angeles at our Airbnb and everything. And I am watching. I don't know if they want me to name names, so I'm not going to name names.
No, that's okay. Yeah,
but you know who I'm talking about. Guys who have been part of the program since before the program was a program, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And watching the progression from no style, coming out of a bad relationship, a sexist relationship. Guy gets into stellar shape, but he still has no social skills. He's got enough money to be a mark, to be a target for sugar babies, but is still sort of naive about the whole thing. And I think I was mentioning this to the group later on. Is like one of the things that I worry about when these guys are like sort of coming out of a bad relationship and they're trying to reintegrate themselves into the sexual marketplace.
Correct.
Is all it takes is one girl to do this to them.
Yeah.
Like
that hasn't happened in a long time.
Just Kino or whatever, or like touchy feely. Like there's some women who like sort of punctuate their conversations with touchy Kino, right? Just that act of Kino is enough for that guy to go, she's the one. She's the one. I've been waiting for this bitch all my life. My ex-wife of the shrew I married 20 years ago would never have ever touched me like that in any way. Right. And I feel like this must be some sign from Jesus, And I'm just like, bro, that's the Molly talking. That's not actually how she really is.
That's why Reignite's so important as a follow-on from like reading the Rational Male. I remember, and that's what helped me through reading Rational Male towards the back end of the book. It talks about the fact that, we are better together than apart. But if you're in a sexless marriage, if you're in a marriage that's not working, you're better off alone and start over. There is a path for you. There is a light at the end of the tunnel for you, but we need to help them figure that out as well, because once they are out of that marriage and now they're single, man, and it's a different world now. Especially for these guys.
I think there's it's a huge mistake. And this is like, I lay this right at the feet of the MGTOW/black pill community, right? There's this big misnomer, I think, that it's like, oh, it's cheaper to keep her, right? I'm sure you probably heard that stupid little thing. And for guys who have the money, yes.
Right.
But most guys, like the average American guy who's in a shit marriage like that, money is the last thing he's got to worry about. He's there because he's dedicated. He's committed to the trail. It is more work to go back than it is to go forward.
Correct.
Right.
He's invested so much. Yeah. He doesn't want to lose that investment.
Yeah. And thinking that if I just stick it out, if I just earn enough of these little gold stars, it's like this. Yeah. It's this. I'm not doing enough, so I'm just going to keep doing more. It's like being the horse in Animal Farm. I will work harder. Right. Because I'm clearly not working hard enough here, because if I was working hard enough, she would be fucking me. Yeah. Right? If I was working hard enough, we wouldn't have these problems. And so the problems of the wife become the problems of the guy. And it's not about cheaper to keep her. It's not about, I don't want to go through a divorce. I can tell you right now, just talking as I have been with Jim Sexton for the last, year and a half, 2 years, that's not what it's about. That might be the precipitator of it. Like she might start making more money. He might have lost prestige. He might have lost status in his job or what he ceases to become the man that she married. right? Like, oh, I married him because he had a lot of status. He was, hot. He was tall. He was fun. He was this, he was that, and everything. And then when they get into a marriage sort of arrangement and they get into this routine, all that newness and all that challenge and all the stuff that used to keep her like really engaged, all of that goes away, and it's traded for mowing the lawn, smelling his farts, sitting across from him while he's chewing on his fucking, cereal, whatever, and then
listening to him breathe.
Yeah, listening to him breathe. For fuck's sake, man. I know you want to like that guy. That's not cheaper to keep her. Get out. Just get out.
I think it was incredibly important to hear it. It was really hard to go through the journey of getting to the point of accepting what you said in the book, that hey, there's a light. You can get through this, and you will be better off. Go for it. Don't stay where you are.
And
there's no need for you to do
yourself that. Went through, and I talk about however much you want to, but like you yourself have gone through this yourself.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I'm still, through this journey. And that's why I love being able to hang out with you and talk about it for hours on the drive back and forth.
Clearly. Yeah. More hours coming back.
Yeah. Man. Yeah. That was Friday afternoon. It was not a great time to try to come back
to go to Vegas. Yes. LA to Vegas at about 4:00 is not a good trip.
And I will be, Rollo knows I'm much more of an open book. I do try to keep some of it as much as I can private for my ex-wife. I don't want her to be embarrassed by any of it or anything, but I'll as the time things come to me, I will bring them up. I don't have a problem with that, but yeah, it was, your book was key. We talked about it before. My son said, Dad, you should really read this book.
Oh, your son was the one that
remember Jacob?
Jacob,
Jacob's like, he came back home from being over, we were in Australia, and he came back over from being in the Marines in the US after COVID. And he just saw that things weren't really working out between us. And he's so aware of a lot of things. And he was red pill aware. And he just said, hey, maybe you should read this book, Rational Male. And it took me a little while, aside from the font. And but that's
changing.
And I had to put it down a couple times. There was a couple points in there that were just, wow, that's tough. That's tough medicine to take when you realize you've made that mistake and that mistake and that mistake. But it was key. Like I said, if you're in the right place mentally and spiritually, or however, that book, it's an epiphany. It'll really open you up. And it, like I said, it does what you want it to do. I know why you wrote the book. It was your brother-in-law, right?
I
there
think
was
a
a
lot of people
precipitous to it, right? But was at the end of it, after I've gone through this portion of the journey and I met you, I'm like, yeah, you know what? I think that was really important, because I don't know, maybe self-deletion would have been something to consider, but after reading the book, it never was.
Yeah.
It just never was.
Yeah. All the stuff that went down with my brother-in-law when he self-deleted, it wasn't so much the self-deletion. I mean, that was pretty rough to fucking deal with, right? But like, it was what came afterwards.
Yeah, watching everyone's reaction to
all
it, right?
of the rationales that came after, like they're trying to sort of like retcon what had happened,
right?
Just so that nobody's to blame. Like, oh, it was just he had something wrong with him, or
because they know the circumstances,
and they don't want to actually
point
confront
fingers
that. And it's like, and it's amazing to me, like my brother-in-law, who was married to my wife's sister, was the one who ended up self-deleting himself, right? Then they both have like a natural brother who actually ended up dying at like 39 in his sleep, just like heart arrhythmia or something like that, just punched his ticket, right? And I will tell you this right now, is everybody on the date that their brother passed away, everybody remembers. They stop for a minute. They're like, just, it's really tough for my mother-in-law, for obvious reasons. But everybody sort of just, holds their breath for, a moment of silence kind of thing on that particular date, right? No one has that for the guy who deleted himself. Nobody cares. Nobody, because they've sort of compartmentalized that. They've made up the decisions of what they're, and this, by the way, it's variations by order of degree that I hear from chicks like that one in that last video. Like there can't be a reason, a woman cannot be the reason for a man's self-deletion. So they will always, it's toxic masculinity. We teach them to be this way. We teach them to bottle their emotions up. It's like, no, they just don't do that because they don't have the hardware. They don't have the evolved firmware. We process emotions differently. I can show you fMRI scans of how men and women's like brain synapses work. If you lay them on top of each other, they're complements to one another, which obviously, to me anyways, is proof positive that men and women are better together than we are apart. The problem is that we fuck up our software. And our software is this idea that, well, women can never be the catalyst for a guy to actually off himself.
Right.
And yes, I'm gonna actually read this real quick because this was too good one. I will get to the other ones here real quick, but I was going to talk about this anyways. Liam Payne, who's the guy the singer from One Direction, life spiraled downward. Now he's gone. He fell out of a 3-story building. Apparently, just fell out. Yes. Yeah.
Well, I could.
And his ex-girlfriend just broke up with him, I think like a year prior or something.
Right.
And he was still trying to contact her.
Yeah, he still had it bad. Yeah, he was down bad for her still. And then he had just gone through some sort of breakup with another chick at that time.
Still pining.
Yeah. And so what does Rollo Tomassi do? Rollo Tomassi pops off and says, yes, the red pill saves lives. If this guy had my book, or if he had access to even like Ryan Stone, I don't care, whoever, like if he had access to this, things might have gone a little bit differently. If he had been, if somebody had given him a book, if somebody had given him some sort of advice like that. And I will tell you this, people think I jump off the rails too quickly on this. I think he was on child support and had a serious case of one-itis. Yeah, most likely. The reason why I bring that up is because one, I see the signs. I've seen them firsthand by my own firsthand. And then also there was an individual named Anthony Bourdain who actually had a very similar experience to this, and everybody responded to it exactly the same way, right? They were like, oh, it wasn't Asia Argento, who was his girlfriend at the time. Right. In fact, Rose McGowan and all her sisters in the quote unquote as above, so below sisterhood. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Everyone wanted to say it wasn't her. You can't blame his death on Asia Argento. Well, guess what? Just this year there was a documentary that comes out, and apparently we can actually, at least at the very least, she was set up the catalyst for what was going on, and all these texts come out later on, and just sort of digging into the life and times of Anthony Bourdain. Again, tragic. But I remember when that happened in 2018, and it was myself and Pat Campbell, we immediately started talking about that. That was a topic of discussion for quite some time. And we said we did the same thing, and exactly the same thing happened. You can't talk, you don't know him. He was on Xanax. He had whatever, like this list of things that it could have been. Yeah. No, it was Asia Argento. He wanted her to be his one. He literally wrote down, and now that we know, literally was writing letters and stuff. You're the love of my life. You're the one. You're my soulmate. Blah blah blah. And that's just how he was. He wore his heart on his sleeve. And this is a guy, because people kept throwing. Hell, I get the questions even today. They'll say, why would a guy like as paid as Anthony Bourdain, famous, basically goes around and eats food all over the world, and gets paid for this shit? And people will say, well, it was Epstein and it was this. And I'm like, no, man, it's so much simpler than that. He was very blue pill. He was what I would call a blue pill alpha. He was certainly not red pill. And in every other aspect of his life, he's probably very much an alpha guy, certainly in his business. Yeah, he was an older gentleman. He was 63, I think, when he offed himself.
He was in his 60s for sure.
So he was, for all intents and purposes, outward appearances anyways, was very much in control of his life, except for that one area. Same thing with One Direction kid, Liam, what's his name? Liam Neeson, Liam Payne. And so I see the signs. And so when people you don't know that, Rollo, you can't say anything. It could have just been an accidental death. And so I'm just like, dude, I see exactly the similarities that go on, not just from my own experiences, but also with Anthony Bourdain and with a lot of other guys as well.
Right.
So when you look at that and you see those predictable frameworks, I'm gonna call it out immediately, and I need to call it out immediately because that's exactly what I did with Asia Argento, and I think I was vindicated over that pretty well. But it wasn't even so much the vindication; it was we need to talk about this stuff because no one wants to talk about it.
No.
No one wants to have the discussion that the catalyst for this guy putting a noose around his neck was because Asia Argento was photographed by the paparazzi in Italy with her 29-year-old boy toy at that time, which set him off.
Right.
Which, of course, because the guy was over invested and over emotional about the whole thing. Again, if the dude had read The Rational Male, if he was red pill, would it have saved his life? I can't say yes or no, but I would probably say more likely no than yes.
Correct. Yeah. It's the best chance. It doesn't, you can take a horse to water. I mean, I had just lost a friend. I told you about him, about a week ago, and top 1% earner working for a major airline as a captain, and girlfriend broke up with him. And I thought I'd connected up with him enough. We had a couple conversations. I told him my journey. I told him about your books. I recommended a couple of them to him. Thought he was pretty well squared away, and didn't work out.
Yeah. Well, when they get
self-deleted,
when you get overly, again, it's like, and I hate that too, because it's funny to me because like in other aspects of the guy's life, he's not zeroed out.
No,
he's like
absolutely not.
I think a lot of people think that when I talk about being zeroed out, it just means like you lost your job, right? Or you got divorced or something like that. It could be any of those things. It's a setback is what it is. And how important, how significant that setback is to the guy is really what sort of defines what being zeroed out is. So, so like, for instance, I was at Alex Hormozy was saying, like, I remember when I was listening to Alex Hormozy one time, was relating this story about how I don't think he had got married at that time, but his wife was his girlfriend at that time. Right. And he had was about ready to file for bankruptcy. And he was like, if you want to leave me, I completely understand. Like he already understood the game back then. But here's this guy who everybody looks up to today as being sort of like the success guru, right? The guy who's going to teach you how to make $1 million and whatever, and your side hustle, and what is it, radical ownership? Well, I guess that would be Jocko Willink. But you know what I mean? It's like he's in that same cut from that same cloth, and here he is relating the story about being zeroed out. Now he overcame that, and he's married to whoever he's married to right now, and has definitely done well for himself. So the guy's even guys who have a lot of money can still be zeroed out if they're still blue pill, if they still, subscribe to this emotionalist nonsense that I'm listening to woman after woman after woman pop off with. Now, the reason for that is whenever I saw like this chick who, like the girl I was just putting up on the screen, very similar to what I was listening to when my brother-in-law, offed himself. Right? They wanted to, like, I remember relating the situation, the scenario to women who didn't even know who he was, and they took my sister-in-law's side instantly. And I'm like, oh, maybe she was just over him. He couldn't the only thing, it was like the sisterhood uber alles. There was no connection. They'd never met in their lives. And the women I had related this by default took her side. Yeah.
And you're talking about the self-deletion side of things. And I think for guys in that demographic, that's what makes it so tough. Because James Saxon talked about it. He's like, well, what's the number one reason for divorce? He goes, the guy loses his job. He's no longer able to provide the lifestyle that she's accustomed to. Or you just see that kind of money coming in and you don't see it coming in anymore, and you can't unsee that. So it's a 1-2 punch. One, he gets kind of zeroed out in the way that he loses his job, and he's got time to recover. He's built up goodwill in the relationship. Maybe he's got a little bit of time, but if he doesn't get things together quickly, if he doesn't recover quickly, the divorce papers are soon to be on their way, right? Because she's going to be like, well, you're not what you were. And it's the 1-2 punch. And that's what makes it really tough to recover from. So here you are, you've lost your job. Now your marriage is on the rocks. Yeah. And it's like, where's the support? And it's like, and it's not in her nature. It's not in their nature. It's not a complaint. I understand. It's a feature, not a flaw.
Well, that's why, like, when I was watching what was going on with Anthony Bourdain and Asia Argento, who's his girlfriend at the time, and then Rose McGowan and all of literally they would call themselves the sisterhood. That's actually where I picked up the name, the sisterhood of Weird, right? And because it seemed to me like it didn't matter what the sort of grievance was that woman would sort of perpetrate. The girls always had their backs. Yeah. And I think you're right. And that's you know, as fucked up as that is for guys, that is a feature and not a bug, because that's really sort of part of the sisterhood uberalis is really an extension of women having to sort of watch each other's backs back in the day when they would become spoils of war.
That's correct.
You know, according to the war brides dynamic, right? So they had to have that sort of solidarity because we're all this sort of oppressed class of citizen. And so therefore it takes a village to raise a child. We need to, you know, have midwives. There's, you know, this mysticism, this feminine mystique that sort of circles around the women who are part of the tribe and who are integrated into the tribe.
Almost like an innate reaction,
right?
But it's built into their firmware.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people, like when I bring up the war brides dynamic, and I bring up the fact that, like, say, like the Vichy French and the or the Dutch women who would basically were good time girls for German officers at that time. And then they would have their head shaved and everything afterwards, you know, because they had essentially betrayed the tribe, or in this case, the nation, right? Which is the greater version of the tribe, right?
Yeah.
And so, but we didn't kill them. We just shamed them.
Yeah.
We would kill the guys.
The hair grows back.
The guys would go to a firing squad and die. Right?
Guys are dead.
Yeah. Guys are dead if they were trying to say, well, you know what, I want to be on the winning side kind of thing. But for women, we almost like expect it to be that way, because I think I think there's something sort of in our human, like for men in particular, but I think women understand this as well, is that women will betray the tribe if it means survival.
Yeah.
And so when you look at, like, say, like Stockholm syndrome and falling in love with your captors and stuff like that, it's just pragmatism when you think about it. That's all it is just the most pragmatic response. And again, this is not so you will hate women or Rollo's busting on women again. No, I'm not. I'm just describing a dynamic that you can see that's evidenced throughout the course of history. And I'm not saying it's right or saying it's wrong. In some cases, it might be right because it kept that chick alive and she now has kids. And so it was a net benefit for her to betray her, like an altruism, right?
Correct.
To betray the tribe so that she could go on and the babies could go on. And like I keep saying, you know, hypergamy, nature, evolution doesn't care how the babies are born. It cares that the babies are born.